The rain did not knock gently that day. It slammed against the small house like it had a mission, rattling the windows and flooding the narrow street until it looked more like a river than a road. Inside, a single father stood frozen at his front door, hand on the handle, heart pounding, because through the blur of rain he could see a woman collapsing onto his porch. She was soaked, exhausted and alone. He had no idea that opening that door would change his life forever. If you believe that kindness can change destinies, take a moment right now to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel Touch of Kindness, because stories like this are proof that second chances still exist. Caleb Monroe had learned long ago that life did not pause for grief. At 38, he was already worn in ways that did not show easily on the outside. His days began early and ended late, shaped entirely around his 7-year-old son, Owen. Since losing his wife 3 years earlier to a sudden illness, Caleb had lived in survival mode, doing just enough to keep the lights on, food on the table, and a sense of normalcy for his child. His small rented house sat on the edge of town, modest and weather-beaten, but it was warm, clean, and filled with quiet love. On that stormy afternoon, Caleb had been repairing a leak in the ceiling when Owen ran to him, wide-eyed, pointing toward the door. Someone was outside, and they looked like they needed help. Caleb hesitated for only a moment. Life had taught him caution, but it had also taught him compassion. When he opened the door, the rain rushed in along with the sight of the woman slumped against the railing. She looked out of place for the neighborhood, even drenched and shivering. Her coat was fine fabric, now heavy with water. Her shoes expensive but ruined by mud. Her hair clung to her face, and exhaustion weighed her down like gravity itself. Without asking questions, Caleb helped her inside, wrapping her in a dry blanket and offering a chair. Owen watched quietly from the hallway, sensing the seriousness of the moment. The storm raged on outside, but inside the house there was warmth, the hum of an old heater, and the smell of soup that Caleb quickly prepared. The woman slowly regained her strength, her breathing evening out, her eyes taking in the humble surroundings. There was no entitlement in her expression, no complaint about the simple furniture or peeling paint, only relief. She introduced herself as Mara Ellison, saying she had been driving when her car broke down on the flooded road. Her phone was dead, and the rain had left her stranded miles from anywhere familiar. She thanked Caleb repeatedly, her voice soft but steady. What Caleb did not know was that Mara Ellison was the CEO of one of the fastest-growing logistics companies in the region, a woman whose days were usually filled with boardrooms, contracts, and power decisions affecting thousands of employees. That day, she had been driving herself after a long morning of meetings, desperate for silence and fresh air, unaware that the storm would strip her of all status and leave her dependent on a stranger's kindness. As the afternoon stretched on, the storm showed no sign of stopping. Caleb offered Mara a place to rest until the rain eased. There was no flirtation, no awkwardness, just two adults sharing a quiet understanding shaped by exhaustion and circumstance. Owen eventually joined them, shy at first, then curious. Mara listened patiently as he talked about school, about his love for drawing, about how his dad made the best pancakes in the world. She smiled in a way that felt genuine, not polite, and something in Caleb's chest loosened without him realizing it. Caleb's life had been small for a long time. Work, home, school, repeat. He had learned not to hope for more because hope had once cost him dearly, yet as the rain softened into a steady drizzle, he found himself talking to Mara about things he rarely shared, about how hard it was to raise a child alone, about the guilt of feeling tired all the time, about the quiet nights when the house felt too empty. Mara listened, truly listened, her eyes reflecting understanding rather than pity. She did not speak of her own struggles yet, but there was a depth to her attention that made Caleb feel seen in a way he hadn't felt in years. When evening approached, the storm finally began to break. The roads would soon be passable, and Mara's car could be towed. She thanked Caleb again, offering to repay him somehow. He waved it off, embarrassed by the idea of being compensated for what felt like basic humanity. She left with a promise to return the blanket once it was cleaned, a small excuse that felt larger than it sounded. As she walked away, Caleb stood in the doorway, rain-soaked air cooling his face, unaware that the quiet peace he felt was the first crack in the wall he had built around his heart. In the days that followed, life returned to routine, but something had shifted. Owen asked about Mara more than once, wondering if she was safe, if her car was fixed. Caleb found himself thinking of her at odd moments, during work breaks, while washing dishes, while watching his son sleep. A week later, there was a knock at the door in broad daylight. Mara stood there, dry this time, holding the folded blanket and a small bag of groceries. She said she had insisted on returning it herself. Caleb invited her in, and once again, the house felt fuller. They began to see each other occasionally after that. Walks in the afternoon when Owen was at school, shared meals, conversations that deepened without force. Mara never spoke about her job in detail, and Caleb never asked. He assumed she was some kind of consultant or manager, someone with a demanding career but a longing for simplicity. What he did see was her kindness toward Owen, her curiosity about ordinary life, and her vulnerability when she spoke of loneliness despite success. She admitted that the higher she climbed, the more isolated she felt. People saw her title before they saw her humanity. The truth came out one afternoon when Caleb brought Owen to a company-sponsored community event, unaware that Mara's company logo was printed everywhere. He froze when he saw her on stage, composed and commanding, the crowd hanging on her words. Owen tugged his sleeve, whispering her name with excitement. Caleb's chest tightened with a mix of confusion and insecurity. He felt suddenly small, exposed, like a life-sized mistake in a place he did not belong. Mara found him after the speech, concern written across her face. She explained everything, not with excuses but honesty. She had never hidden who she was intentionally. She had simply wanted to be Mara, not CEO Ellison, in the one place she had felt human again. Caleb listened, struggling with emotions he hadn't anticipated. He worried about the gap between their worlds, about what he could offer someone like her. That night he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, afraid that the fragile happiness he had allowed himself to feel was already slipping away. Days passed with less contact. Caleb pulled back, convincing himself that distance was the responsible choice. Mara felt it too, the sudden absence, the unanswered calls. She showed up one afternoon unannounced, not as a powerful executive, but as the woman who had once stood soaked on his porch. She told him that success had never protected her from pain, and wealth had never replaced connection. She said that the day he opened his door to her had reminded her of who she was before ambition hardened her edges. Caleb finally allowed himself to be honest. He admitted his fear, his grief, his doubt. He spoke of his wife, of the promise he had made to protect his son's heart. Mara listened the same way she always had, without interruption, without judgment. She told him that love did not erase loss, but it could grow around it, stronger because of it. She did not ask him to change or become more than he was. She told him that what he had was enough. Time did its quiet work. Trust returned slowly, deeper than before. Mara became part of their daily rhythm, helping Owen with homework, laughing in the kitchen, sitting beside Caleb in comfortable silence. She never tried to rescue them with money or status. Instead, she invested her time, her patience, her presence. Caleb watched her choose them every day, not out of charity, but love. On a bright daytime afternoon, months later, Caleb stood in the same doorway where he had once opened his home to a stranger. The sky was clear, the street dry, the world calm. He realized that kindness, given without expectation,